Go. Thank you so much for coming on Wellness Your Way, Drew. I'm thrilled to have you here.
No, I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Of course. Well, we just started talking before recording and I wanted to dive in, but I'm glad we started recording so the whole audience can hear us. Your career has been really interesting. You were a former professional baseball player with the Toronto Blue Jays. You have a PhD in biomedical engineering. Now you founded this regenerative medicine company. Help us connect the dots.
Yeah, I guess it has had a few twists and turns, but always, I think from a very young age, I was focused on both medicine and baseball, right? Mm-hmm. And both of those things actually run in my family. So I had a famous father who played professional baseball with the New York Mets and the St. Louis Cardinals, won a World Series with both of those groups. It was actually the 69 Miracle Mets. And then also he went back to medical school after his career and became a doctor and was actually the team physician for the Blue Jays for 35 years. So those things were kind of in my blood already.
Amazing.
So grew up playing baseball. And, I think from grade 7 is when I had my first kind of moment where I got to witness a surgery and be, in the OR and see how all of these things worked. And from that moment on, I wanted to be a doctor. So pursued both of those things and had a pretty awesome opportunity to go down to the University of Michigan. Did an undergrad and a master's there in molecular cell developmental biology while I was playing baseball for the Michigan Wolverines. And,
wow.
Yeah, it was fantastic. We won the Big Ten in my senior year when I was co-captain with some of my teammates. It was really a fantastic time. And I was going to stay and head off to medical school in Michigan. And ultimately, I had the opportunity to play professionally after that. So I was offered a contract with the Blue Jays. And I think with a little bit of quick advice from my dad, he suggested that I pursue baseball and then I could always go back and do medical school. I tried to convince them to let me do both, but the answer was no.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine.
Yeah, well, baseball is too many games. I mean, there's some amazing, there's even a Canadian that has done the NFL and med school at the same time, but with 162 games in the season, that was going to be impossible. But they would let me do a PhD. So I ended up, that's how I went down the regenerative medicine side. And I'll be forever grateful for that opportunity because it really drew me into this world of leveraging our own cells to heal our bodies as we age, which just the potential and the amazing advancements that have happened in the last while has been, just so inspiring.
Incredible. I feel like you're a lifelong learner like I am. I love having many different passions all over the place. So I'm excited to hear more about your current passion, which is regenerative medicine, as you said, your degree is in, and regenerative cell therapy. So for those audience members who this is the first time they've ever heard those words, can you give us like the beginner's level intro to what that is?
Yeah, so regenerative medicine is essentially our efforts to use our own cellular material, our own cells, to treat disease and aging so that we really are returning that patient back to the state that they were in before entering that disease state. And so you can think about this in a lot of different ways, right? It's returning our own cells that are performing and using those to replace the ones that start to fail. And that can be done at a cellular level, right? An organ level. So it is a very wide kind of range of different treatments and really includes everything from some of these new aesthetic medicine treatments to really reinvigorate and rejuvenate our skin, all the way through to groups that are pursuing some very long-term strategies, but I think are coming in our lifetimes in regenerating a human heart or a kidney, an organ system. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So of course I can imagine so many different applications. We'll go into detail on some, but you started by saying everything from skin health or skin rejuvenation to a human heart. Can you just give us an overview of some of these ways that regenerative medicine can be used?
Yeah, so right now, I think that what we can think of is each cell in our body is really like a factory, right? And it has a job and its output is something that we need. In the skin, right, we have cells that produce collagen and elastin, hyaluronic acid, and these different elements to maintain our skin health. Well, as we age, our ability to do those things starts to diminish. And you can think about that same kind of idea for every aspect of our body, right? In our heart, we've got cardiomyocytes, these muscle cells that are trying to contract and essentially move blood through the body. And they do that through beating. Well, they end up getting older, they don't perform as well. If there's damage, scar tissue can form, and so you don't get this uniform beating. And all of these different things can kind of like come to the failure of that system. And so for us, what we've been able to see in my career is really that transition of almost science fiction, of thinking about being able to create cells for us, right, on demand and treat things, to actually seeing it put into practice. And so I've been lucky to witness individuals taking younger cells that have been cryogenically frozen. And in these trials, the scientists successfully put those back into the skin to see the rejuvenation of that skin, essentially giving your youth back, right? Giving your younger cells back. All the way through to a group in North Carolina that has literally 3D printed and grown lab-grown bladders from a patient's own cells. Wow. And 12 of those patients, they've already implanted that bladder. So we start with organ systems that are not life-threatening, right? So here's a bladder, right? So it's not our heart, but still fairly complex, right? It has a very specific purpose. We've been able to recreate that, implant that, so that those patients can now control urination again and actually live a much higher quality of life. And so it's a beautiful result. And so I think that, it is a major stepping stone on our way to think about approaching more complex organ systems and life-saving organs.
I'm going to jump us a little bit ahead here, and then we'll come back to some of the basics, but I can feel listeners thinking, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And yet this can get a little scary. I know this field is very controversial. You can think of the kind of strange cases of someone really believing they're going to live forever, or optimizing themselves at such a level that might not even be normal or natural. And then on the flip side, some life-saving therapies, which almost everyone could get behind. So talk to us a little bit about this controversy, what regulations are standing in your way, anything you want to touch on here.
Yeah, so I actually look at regulations as not standing in our way, but there to make sure that we are deploying these new technologies and giving them into physicians and ultimately patients' hands with only their benefit, right? Yeah. With the intent. And so I actually look at the groups, the governing bodies like the FDA and Health Canada as supporting the patient. Awesome. And us and holding us accountable to make sure that we're delivering the best care. So I think that they're a partner, right, of ours in delivering healthcare. That being said, sometimes people get frustrated with the speed that these things come to fruition at. And I think as patients, sometimes we have to exhibit a bit of patience and ultimately be okay that these things do need to have rigorous testing before they actually, go into human beings. And so that can be frustrating, especially when it is a therapy or a treatment that is going to vastly improve your quality of life or save your life, because time is not on your side. And I fully understand that people are desperate for solutions. Yeah. On the same side, stem cells is a pretty catchy word. Yeah. Right? A lot of people are drawn to it, and all sorts of people, ones that are trying to deliver the best possible care for their patients, and other ones that are trying to make a quick buck. Right. And so what we see is an extreme diversity in the level of care that groups touting stem cell therapies are delivering right now. Yeah. And it's funny, I talked about this recently with a colleague about and it is an issue in the space, because ultimately there are people that are either moving too fast or delivering completely unscientifically grounded treatments that have potential greater damage to the patient than delivering benefit. Yeah. And so how do you find your way as somebody that is in this space and trying to deliver the best care, right? And be above board in every way. Right. And how do you communicate that to a patient, right? It's hard enough for physicians to understand, right, which groups are doing things perfectly. Imagine now a consumer, right, that is looking for the best healthcare option for them. And I think one of the best things that we concluded was ultimately, if the group that is delivering the care has partnerships and is working side by side with groups in academia, right? So,
Yeah.
for some intensive purposes, non-biased groups that are trying to drive innovation and are supported with public funds and other things, if they have partnerships with them, that's a very good sign. The
Yeah.
other really good sign is that they're publishing, and publishing not articles or marketing materials and things,
Right.
right? Or blogs by whatever physician or medical
Right.
practitioner, but publishing in, high impact factor peer-reviewed journals, and making sure that their work is known, and you're allowing groups to not necessarily pick apart every piece of intellectual property, but understand the way that things are being done and delivered, so-called under the hood, right? Like really exposing their practices to make sure that things are being done appropriately. And absolutely not everybody does that.
Yeah.
It is something that I think is going to happen sequentially, right?
Okay.
So we see a lot of very near-term therapies in regenerative medicine that are coming really on the heels of PRP. And so for people, I'm sure a lot of people are aware of what PRP is, but for some that don't, PRP is platelet-rich plasma, and it is ultimately taken from drawing your blood, right? So taking a tube of your blood, spinning that into centrifuge, which uses gravity to separate red blood cells from like the plasma and platelets. And so ultimately what we can do is we can concentrate all the growth factors and the nutritional components that are in your blood and deliver that in a concentrated way to a site of injury, or to a tissue that you're hoping to have some rejuvenation or benefit within. And so this is extremely popular in aesthetic medicine and sports medicine, where we're thinking of connective tissues like skin and cartilage and tendons, ligaments, right? All of these different tissues, and trying to heal them or have them perform at their best. And so, vampire facelift, made famous by Kim Kardashian, is an example of using PRP topically after microneedling or some other procedure on our face. And you get that kind of influx of those nutrients in your blood. Well, we can now not just take a byproduct of your blood, but we can use your cells to act like these factories that I talked about earlier, to essentially create the things that tissue, unfortunately, that's getting older in your body and maybe not performing as well, and producing enough of these elements, we can get those cells to produce more for you. And so it really is a stepping stone towards thinking about like some of the science fiction stuff of regrowing an organ, but thinking about using your own cells, potentially younger cells that you've banked in advance, which is really where the benefit kicks in.
Yeah.
And using those to essentially create yourself collagen, elastin, and all of these skin nutrients, hyaluronic acid that, as we age, we produce less and less of.
So amazing. So many questions. I'm going to jump off on the PRP, since that's what you think is closest to mass market, or however we would call that. My dad's going through PRP right now for his shoulder sports injury. And so I understand kind of what he's going through, but let's take it a step further from where you went. So we're extracting the blood, we're putting it through the centrifuge, we're separating red blood cells, plasma, platelets. And then why is this particular component going to help his shoulder? I understand these are cells that are working the right way, and maybe the cells in his shoulder are not, but how do we isolate the good ones? How does this even work?
Yeah. So we don't need to isolate like the good cells within that, because this is actually no cells, right? This is just essentially
Just the
from our blood that is responsible for carrying all of these nutrients and signals and beneficial things throughout our body and delivering them to where we need them. We're fast tracking that process, and we're concentrating that process, and we're putting it right at the site of injury. And so you end up getting an enhanced effect of what your body's trying to do naturally. So it's very natural, right? Which is one thing that people adore. There's no toxins or different things that you're putting into your body.
Right.
That being said, we track about 6 different growth factors that are present in our blood that we find in platelet-rich plasma that contribute to some of these enhanced effects. And now we start to think about that in how can we fine tune it, right? So the next level of PRP is really thinking about these 6 generalist growth factors that are present in our blood, and how do we deliver ones that are specific to that tissue type that's in need. So there are growth factors in our body that are specific to our skin in different areas in our body. And so if we're worried about skin or we're worried about another type of connective tissue, some of these factors are going to be beneficial. And skin has a lot of similarities with our musculoskeletal system because of the types of, they're all types of connective tissues, really. And they all need the same types of things like collagen and some proteoglycans and things like that. And so getting the cells to produce those things, in addition to the growth factors that we normally find in PRP, actually add to that potential effect. And so as an example, in PRP, we track about 6 growth factors that we think are delivering majority of the benefit from those proteins. And in some of the products that we're creating in the lab right now, using your own banked cells, we're exploring 21 different things. And some of them, not just growth factors, but the actual building blocks of those tissues, like collagen and elastin and hyaluronic acid. So we're not only giving the growth factors to tell the cells what to do and keep doing, but we're also giving them a head start by delivering those things that they're trying to produce in abundance.
So when you talk about something like collagen or hyaluronic acid coming from maybe this banked tissue, how is that different from just taking a collagen supplement or hyaluronic acid supplement?
So if you're taking a supplement, right, so there's very popular to ingest collagen, right? So we have collagen drinks now, it's infused in water, in everything. And ultimately our digestive system is going to break that apart and digest it. And what we're going to do is we're going to get benefit from some of the small kind of protein chain structures that are absorbed. But collagen is very big. Hyaluronic acid is massive, right? And cross-links. And so it can become infinite basically in size molecularly. So these things are very tough for us to absorb. And so even when they're in creams and serums, they're not fully absorbed in our skin. They're better absorbed when we open up pores, like through microneedling and things, but the natural channels in our skin are not big enough to absorb them. And it creates a surface layer where you protect your own collagen underneath it, but it's not getting integrated truly with what the collagen, creating the matrix between our cells. It kind of sits on the surface. Conversely, when we ingest something, we have to break it apart, and that provides our bodies, right, the building blocks to go create collagen, which is great. But it's not delivering collagen. Like, it's not like all of a sudden it goes from your stomach and works its way up, and just, integrates into your skin, breaks it up into pieces, and then our cells have to remanufacture it.
Yes, I get it. In my language, what I've told my audience before is collagen peptides. We'll see that on the bottle. A peptide is a long chain of amino acids, maybe not quite as long as a protein itself, but the amino acids are like words, I say. The peptide is like a sentence. And when you ingest the sentence or the peptide, your body breaks it down into words. Now you got a bunch of words floating around, and hopefully your body knows what it can do to make that sentence again. But it is not as direct, as you're saying, as actually injecting that full sentence right where it needs to go. So it doesn't have to rely on the body to create the right sentence again. Is that kind of correct?
So that's a fantastic analogy. I might even try to steal that. If you're okay, I'll credit you.
Please,
it's
go
fantastic.
for it.
On top of that, like when we think about collagen as a good example, every year that goes by in our lives, our skin produces 1% less collagen.
Okay.
So if our production level is decreasing, it doesn't really matter if we have all the building blocks at our disposal. Our speed at putting them together is going down. So you have to think about this by providing your body with the building blocks to create it, and supporting your body, or making sure that you can actually assemble those in the right order.
Gotcha.
I think that's what's so amazing about being able to use your younger cells to inhibit, like they haven't experienced that age and that diminishment of productivity. Use them to create those things for you initially and replenish them. And then one day put those younger cells back in, right? So essentially keep them on ice, literally, and then put them back in one day. You may be a decade or two older, but those cells haven't aged a day.
Amazing. So let's get into the good stuff, because we're skirting around it. You're talking about saving these younger cells on ice, literally, and injecting them later. This is what your company does. So feel free to talk about Acorn as much as you want in this discussion. But I would love to know which particular cells need to be used. This might sound scary to people. Is it bone marrow? Is it hair? What are you using?
So, first of all, let me say off the bat, our approach is completely non-invasive
Awesome.
and painless. So let's get that out of the way with. This is easy. I've done this on my 5-year-old son at home,
Love
and
it.
the older ones as well. The older ones complain more. No, this is so simple and easy. There's the days of drilling into your iliac crest or using liposuction to get adipocytes, right? These days are not necessary to create a preventative solution of banking your cells at a younger age. We can do it from something as simple as the hair follicle.
Amazing.
In my work at Sinai, I was actually at Mount Sinai in Toronto. I was actually working on a team that was trying to create cartilage to give back to patients as they aged and damaged. So, a huge problem, right? Our cartilage ends up failing us at some point in our lives, and it acts as this amazing buffer in between bones in our joints. And when it goes away, it's extremely painful, right?
Yeah.
And you stop doing the things that you love doing, staying active. And then unfortunately, it actually leads to lots of other health complications because you're not staying active anymore. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunately, kind of like one of those first things that leads to a cascade of others. So it's a huge problem. And we ended up having a group that came together to try to be able to create cartilage on demand for patients, right? With
Amazing.
regenerative medicine. And so I was actually responsible for taking animal studies that were very successful into human models. And so I was going into the OR, taking biopsies of patient samples as they were coming in for a hip or knee replacement.
Wow.
And taking them back to the lab to see if in practice we could grow out human structures like we did with the animal ones. And it didn't go very well.
Oh,
right?
no.
Oh yeah, no. So it was definitely kind of one of those moments where you're like, okay, why isn't this happening very well? Let's dive into all the areas. And as it turns out, it was completely linked to the age of the individual and how far down a disease state they had progressed, like osteoarthritis for cartilage. All of the animal studies done previously were done in the equivalent of teenagers. So these adolescent animals primed for growth and development, of course, we take some of their cells, put them in culture, and they grow fantastically. Well, as soon as we go into trying to treat human patients at their time of need, right? When they're coming in for surgery to replace with metals and plastics their joints, we take the sample and see if we can do the same thing. Well, it's not going to work well.
Yeah.
When we had younger human samples or older animal samples, the exact opposite happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a super sad moment in my life. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, all of these amazing endeavors, ours and others around the world, groups in Tel Aviv working on 3D printing human hearts. Next door in Toronto, we had a group that was able to create, miniature kidneys. All of these amazing endeavors are going to be benefiting humankind, and have the potential to benefit us exponentially. Yet, we're not going to be able to help the people that are most vulnerable, and unless we really have a better starting material, a better source of cells for them, it's going to be too late. And so in order to really think about the generations that are alive today and make sure that they had the opportunity to take advantage of these next generation healthcare treatments, the best option is, well, let's stop the aging for a subset of their cells. So that's what we'll use in the future when we need to create these applications. Now, it's already started in areas like skin. And of course, we've got some lead time to prepare for individuals that are, have the potential of taking advantage of some of these life-saving treatments. But the biggest thing that we took away was we need to be thinking about the patient early in their life, when they are healthy or as young as possible, really, and bank those cells. And so it has been a pretty wild ride of turning that into an opportunity for patients to actually do. We spent many years in the laboratory, really analyzing our ability to do this non-invasively. And it turns out the hair follicle is perfect for this.
Wow.
So the hair follicle has multiple germ layers of cells, which basically means we've got different lineages of cell types in our bodies. So that's hugely advantageous. It also readily expands. So we can take a small sample and create a big sample, and we can reprogram it. So we can turn like skin cells into kidney cells fairly readily, right? Which is a Nobel Prize winning technology that won the Nobel Prize in 2012, and now is really kind of like the power behind a lot of these long-term organ regeneration type projects.
Is that pluripotent? Is that what people say?
It is, yeah. Okay. So it's essentially taking a skin cell and turning it into a pluripotent stem cell.
So cool.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing, and we've actually done that in our lab at Acorn. We've got a multitude of research projects. A lot of our focus is on delivering skincare applications like now. And in the future, we've got long-term projects with academic groups, really the top institutions across Canada, and have just started more relationships in the US. But we've got programs to create nerve cells from your hair follicles. We've already created pancreas progenitor cells from your hair follicles.
Ah,
Yeah, I know it's
amazing for
pretty
type 1
wild stuff.
diabetes.
Exactly. Yeah, and my brother is a type 1 diabetic, so obviously that project is very close to home for me.
My sister as well. So please do your work fast. And my
We're
sister's
we're
husband. So we got a lot
we're
of skin
working
in
on
the
it every
game
day.
between us.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's and these collaborations with experts right from the University of Toronto and Mount Sinai Hospital to really like take our expertise and their expertise on the organ side and meet in the middle, and to create these solutions that you can actually visualize a path to benefit the patient is unbelievably exciting.
Wow. Okay, so let's go back to the hair follicle. It's
Yes.
perfect because it expands, it can become this pluripotent stem cell. You're taking, I imagine you're suggesting people like pull hairs out from the base and
Back to
actually
the
get the
scalp.
good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look at, I don't know about everybody, but I certainly have plucked a wild eyebrow or two. I think I'd
Oh
look like
yeah.
Levy if I hadn't. So ultimately, it's not painful. We've
Yeah,
all done it. And now we're just
totally.
taking it from the back of our scalp. We lose 100 hair follicles every day,
Oh my goodness.
right?
Yeah.
So we collect of like way less than that. So,
Love it.
we're targeting 50 hair follicles. So
Love
it's a
it.
very low volume to what we naturally lose every day.
Yep.
You get more than one every time you take a pluck. So it goes very quickly. We see people do
Great.
this in 15, 20 minutes. And ultimately you have thousands of cells at the tip of every follicle that we then put into our special media to transport that to our central lab. And in that lab, they're processed, validated. You get a report back telling you that everything made the trip, made the process, and is alive and viable right before going into cryogenics, and we freeze it down at negative 196 degrees Celsius.
Wow. So how do you know that freezing it at negative 196 degrees Celsius is keeping it the same for many years to come? Is that just a common knowledge thing or what?
Well, I mean, it might be common knowledge in my field, but ultimately, yeah, like bringing it down to that temperature stops cellular metabolism. So
Okay.
they literally are frozen in time. They are not aging. They're not
Wow.
accumulating damage because they're running, right? So it is an amazing opportunity to freeze them down. But we've been doing that practice, albeit we've made improvements to it, but we've been doing cryogenic freezing of samples since the 1960s as a scientific community. It started with research samples, then it moved into fertility, and now it's moving into really like, personalized medicine. And so
Gotcha.
this is a new opportunity for you to freeze your cells for you personally to use in some of these therapies that are now here or coming extremely quickly. But the idea of freezing your cells and the 60 years of data around freezing cells and pulling them out. So theoretically, these cells could stay there for 1,000 years, right? Like it doesn't matter because they're frozen in time. But
Wow.
we do have actual hard data of samples that have been frozen for 6 decades and have been retrieved and
Amazing.
alive and viable.
That is just so cool. And I've
Mhm.
heard you use an analogy that we're kind of on the forefront of regenerative medicine, just like associating it with the Wright brothers. Can you tell us that
Yeah.
analogy in the context of like, am I going to be able to use my cells 2 years from now or 1,000 years from now?
Yeah, so absolutely. And I do use the Wright brothers just because it's this other technology that today we now take for granted, right? We
Yeah.
just accept that it's possible. But back in, right before the discovery of flight, right, in the early 1900s, flight was this dream, right? And so the Wright brothers ended up, flying their first plane. It
Yep.
only traveled about 100 feet, right? What didn't deliver any value, but it was this massive discovery. Ultimately, before it started delivering value to people, it would take another 5 almost decades of
Yeah.
developments and new things that really allowed us to understand flight, harness that power, right? Generate better lift, propel those things with motors, right? All of those different additions onto the discovery of flight resulted in, I think it was 46-ish years later, the first person actually as a passenger being transported across the Atlantic Ocean.
Cool.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
as long as that took, in less than 10 years after that, we had now discovered supersonic flight.
Yeah.
So just like the multiplication, really the exponential addition of technology so quickly allowed us to just leap forward in less than a decade to something that was inconceivable even a decade previously. So I think we're in that moment where we're now crossing the Atlantic, right, with regenerative medicine.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely excited for the next decade of care. We're already seeing, people leverage their cells right now. It's, the future's not evenly distributed, but it is here. Patients are receiving benefit. Oftentimes it's Hollywood elite, right? Or, high-end athletes that are receiving the next generations of regenerative medicine, probably before it's completely democratized. But it's coming very quickly because we already have results in benefiting patients today. And ultimately, the best thing that we can do, in my mind right now, is to make sure that we have the best version of ourselves available to leverage.
Yeah. So I'm assuming and really hoping you're not just taking the hair follicles from your son, but for yourself too. This is going to happen in your lifetime that you're going to be able to use this. True?
I think our oldest patient was 83 years old. So we've got people that are making the decision that they believe in that next 10 years. They plan to be around at 93. And they're saying, I want to make sure that I've got my 83-year-old self ready to use. And ultimately, he's right, because when you think about it, there are metrics that we track in our bodies as they get worse. And one of them is the genetic mutations that we endure, right? Which lead to obviously cells improperly functioning and cancers and all sorts of terrible things. But every decade we're alive, the number of genetic mutations we experience in our bodies doubles. So at least from a genetic mutation standpoint, his 83-year-old cells are going to be twice as good as they are at 93.
That is so amazing. I want to meet that 83-year-old guy. One of my heroes, I don't even know his name, but he graduated at 97 years old, valedictorian from his class from college. He had never gone to college before. And I'm like, that guy is cool. If you are continuing to live your life and achieve your goals all the way through life, I want to know you. So bravo for your 83-year-old client. Let's make this a practical example. You've talked a lot about skin. Personally, I care much more about the pancreas and the heart and all this stuff. But for the average person who has skin, let's give an example for them. We know right now we're limited to, wearing sunscreen if we're going to have too much sun exposure, maybe even taking collagen in the hope our body can make those sentences, having healthy nutrients in our diet, things like that. I feel like, to use a baseball analogy, those are like little dinky hits, and regenerative medicine could be a home run. What would regenerative medicine do for the average person's skin?
Okay, so the skin is the largest organ in our body. Okay, it also takes the initial hit from pretty much anything from the outside world and protects us and all of our internal components. So it's unbelievably important, both from a health side, and also it's our first introduction to anybody new. It is it's our face, right? And so from an aesthetic side as well, because a lot of, like, for instance, the discovery of reprogramming cells was done in skin cells. Our work has all been done in skin cells, right? And harvesting them to leverage. Skin is one of those first things that we are seeing applications actually come to fruition and be accessible and available. And so there's clinical trials from the healthcare side around our skin going on to treat discoloration of our skin, burn victims, diabetic foot ulcers, venous leg ulcers, all sorts of different conditions to really help us regrow and regenerate our skins faster, right? But then also on the aesthetic side, right? So ultimately, the building blocks are breaking down, right? The fibroblasts underneath our skin are not performing to the same level and keeping that rigidity. We get undulations, wrinkles, all of these different things that are happening as we age because the structures and the contents that our cells are producing are not keeping up with the demands of our skin. And so I think one of the nearest term things, because we are taking skin cells and there is no manipulation step of turning them into kidney cells, right? Or
Yeah.
pancreas cells. They're already skin cells. So they're already in a usable form. We
Yeah.
can then be thinking about applying those technologies very, very quickly. And in the world of aesthetics, we have already seen in the animal models and some of the initial human studies that by putting back in either building blocks or the younger cells themselves, it improves the rate of collagen, not only generally, but even those younger cells influence our older cells, almost remind them how to
Wow.
do this better. And so we end up having
Wow.
this communal effect where we can start to see ourselves as we age, kickstarting not only our skin by introducing younger cells, but also the older cells that are still there, almost reteaching them again. This is how we produce collagen and hyaluronic acid and do a better job of it.
Amazing. So, uh, hypothetically, if I were to use some of my cells for my facial skin, then maybe skin all over my body would get the message and start to do its job better, or
Yeah,
not?
well, so
Not
what we've shown is that it's local, right?
okay.
So
Oh,
cells that are
well,
close by to each other, we haven't looked at like what that result is, but we know that it's soluble factors that are released by cells that are in the same proximity as each other, and ultimately, I think that what we'll see, like practically, you asked me where are people going to start to do this first.
yeah.
I think the first waves will be people that have banked their cells. We then culture those cells up in our lab. Create the products of those cells, like the collagen, the hyaluronic acid, the elastin, the things that we're getting deficient in, and putting that back into our cells, right? Either topically with like PRP as an agent, right, a
Yep.
delivery agent, along with microneedling or things, or even injected. So that'll be the first wave, and then the second wave will actually say, okay, now let's take the younger cells and put them back in and actually repopulate our skin. And so
Cool.
those are the things that we see coming very, very quickly. But again, I think all of these are stepping stones to us just continuing to deliver better care and
Yeah.
ultimately leave our skin in a better state to defend ourselves and look good as
Yes.
well.
Amazing. Do you think we'll ever, now maybe we're talking like 100 years in the future, but will we ever get to the point where it's just like, whoop, I need a full body tune up. Let me get an injection of my own cells and like everything gets better? Or does the science require that it's always so precise and local and specific?
So I think that we're going to learn a lot of things. And again, like this is, thinking we're acting as futurists here, thinking about what is
Yeah.
possible, right? So
Yeah.
I think that we are going to learn a tremendous amount from how these cells are actually performing their jobs better through small molecule discovery, right? Drug discovery, and a lot of these endeavors and the synergies that they have with regenerative medicine. Some of my colleagues that are in that space, and I will get together, and it's always really interesting conversations
I'm
about where we think
sure.
is going. But I do think that we're going to have discoveries that we're going to be able to understand better what supplements, both injected and ingested, that we're
Yeah.
able to use to help maintain cellular health throughout our lives. And again, we are in the very beginnings of that type of nutritional and supplement discovery.
Yes.
There's a lot of information out there right now, but that's going to start to get very precise and even
Mm.
personalized, right, for us, depending on our makeups. And so those things in concert with each other, where you have general things that you can take to maintain, and then you almost get a tune-up, for respective areas that are your
Yeah.
areas of need for you personally, I think is absolutely reasonable. And I don't think it's in 100 years. I think it's coming in less than a handful.
Oh, wow. That is so exciting. I would love to be a fly on the wall for those conversations, not participating, just soaking up all of the knowledge that you have. That's really exciting. So, talk to us about the process. If I were to bank my own cells, and in fact, I signed up to be on the waiting list of Acorn, or the, I don't know, beta, or you tell us the terminology, but what will the process look like for me?
Okay, so right now you can go online at acorn.me,
Okay.
acorn.me, and request access, right? So get onto the sign up list of saying you'd like to do it. We are working as fast as we can to be available everywhere. Right now, we launched in Toronto, Canada.
Great.
And we're available through a number of sports med, plastic surgeons, dermatologists, executive health centers, and wellness practices in the area. That expands right throughout the rest of Canada. We've got a number of places in some of the larger cities, but we're going to be launching in the US later this year.
Awesome.
And it's coming very close. I'm really excited. I don't want to pinpoint the exact moment, but we already have our location. We already are setting up things and building the team to launch in the US
Great.
here later this year. And so as we have partner clinics that are joining on in your area, as part of that sign up list, you let us know what city you're in, and we'll let you know the day that it's available. And that way you can be first in line to go in and get it done. And so it's exciting for us because we're working with some of the top, physicians really, in Canada right now, and have already recruited some of the top physicians to be the first people to deliver this in the US. And
Amazing.
so, you're going to be able to visit, these clinics, have your cells collected simply, easily, and walk away, and everything else is taken care of, and you'll get a report back from us saying that it was all successful, and all of the metrics around your cells.
Amazing. So then I get the report back. I know that my cells checked out. They're fine. They're being cryogenically frozen. And I pay a monthly or yearly membership, but I don't have to commit right now to when I'm going to use them. You're kind of saying I'm going to hold them indefinitely until you stop paying. Is that
Yes,
true?
we'll be the safeguard keepers. And ultimately, we are Canadians, so we definitely believe in access to healthcare. So we've tried to make this as reasonable as possible. Obviously, there's a one-time collection fee with our partners, and that varies by location.
Right.
But on the other side, we've kept the kind of program very approachable. So right now we're cheaper than Netflix. So we have a monthly fee. You can choose a yearly option, but if you're at home watching the new season of Stranger Things right now, you can afford to bank yourselves.
I love it. I think Stranger Things I haven't seen either one, so I can't say, but it might be a better, less offensive term. When clients tell me I don't have time to go for a walk or something, I'm like, oh, what'd you think about the last episode of The Bachelor? And if they tell me, then I know they actually have time to go for a walk. So same thing applies here. If you, quote, don't have the finances for this, trust me, I understand we are all pulled in a million directions financially, but really prioritize what you think is most important. And maybe it is Stranger Things, or maybe it is your future health. I'll let them all decide for that.
Absolutely. And if you do decide to prioritize regenerative medicine and the future of having your younger cells, we've done everything we can to make it accessible. So, it is something that I think that people can approach, and we've got some fantastic family plans too. So you can do your whole household for a single fee. And that makes it very approachable for people with teenagers at home, thinking about them, because in their minds, they're still invincible. So they're not thinking about, longevity and things they may face in their lifetime.
That's amazing. So we will definitely include the link to Acorn for anyone interested in signing up on the wait list below. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Because I could pick your brain for the next 3 hours, but I won't. Anything else you want to leave us with, Drew?
Nothing. I mean, we covered so much.
We did.
You asked the best questions, so that leads to not a ton more to say at the end. But no, this has been a tremendous honor to have me on to share our work. We're extremely excited, and I can't wait to get south of the border and enter the US. I'll be down there very shortly, actually, for a trip to keep on setting things up.
Amazing. Well, I can't wait to see the future of Acorn. I'm grateful that you're there at the helm, and I will be here cheering you on the whole way. Thanks again for coming on Wellness Your Way, Drew. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.